All right, check this out. Former acting Uvalde CISD police chief, school district police officer indicted on charges. Oh yeah, check this out.
As we come on the air tonight at 6 o'clock. As we come on the air tonight at 6 o'clock, we continue to follow breaking news out of Uvalde. That's where 19 kids and 2 teachers were killed 2 years ago.
A short time ago, we learned a grand jury has returned 2 indictments in connection to the 2022 mass shooting at Robb Elementary School.
KVU's Brian Mays and senior reporter Tony Plahetsky are both covering this story tonight. They join us live from Uvalde. Brian and Tony.
That's the important news today. The grand jury did return 2 indictments for 2 officers who were part of that response to that mass shooting 767 days ago here in Uvalde. I'm live at the Uvalde County Courthouse with senior reporter Tony Plahetsky. We do know there were 2 indictments, Tony. We now know who they were, and one of those people is now in custody this afternoon.
Brian, as we were going on the air, we were able to confirm that a name that has been at the center of this investigation and of that flawed police response, Pete Arredondo, we are told is now in custody here in Uvalde at the Uvalde County Jail. Again, Brian, facing charges of injury to a child by omission. We also have been able to confirm the identity of a second law enforcement officer.
A second one.
His name is Adrian Gonzalez. He is a former Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District officer. And Brian, we are told that efforts are underway right now to secure himself surrendering to the Uvalde County Jail on these charges. Brian, these are felony charges. And again, as you mentioned,
felony charges
of a grand jury investigation that began in January and has spanned these 6.5 months.
Pete Arredondo is a person that was pretty much the person people pointed to as the leader of the flawed response. The officers waited more than 77 minutes on that day in May of 2022 before they entered the classroom.
Don't forget as well, ladies and gentlemen, these are the same police officers that were threatening to arrest the parents. Parents were standing around frustrated. These police officers were doing nothing, so the parents were saying, screw it, we're going to go save our children. And the police officers were threatened to arrest them if they entered the school premises.
He's one of the 2 that's now been indicted. 2 of hundreds of officers that responded that day. Is this the end? Will there be more indictments, more grand jury testimony down the line?
Oh, it's far from over.
To be clear, the grand jury that was seated to hear this case, their term is expected to end, Brian, tomorrow at the end of the month. They sat for a 6-month duration. We had been anticipating that they would finalize their investigation this week. Frankly, we've been here for a couple of days now awaiting this outcome. I do not anticipate there will be additional charges, although it is possible, but I think it is unlikely. It is our understanding that in recent months, in recent weeks, as this grand jury, Brian, has heard live testimony from a number of officers at that scene, that their attention, for one reason or another, and we hope, by the way, to learn more about this, their attention has been focused on these 2 very specific law enforcement officers. Again, Pete Arredondo's name has been tied to the investigation since it started, but Officer Gonzalez is a name that, while has been made public and part of the public conversation, not nearly to the extent as former Chief Arredondo.
And finally, Tony, we know that this is very rare for officers in this situation, this kind of response, to be charged with a crime, a criminal offense. How rare is it for this to happen the way we're seeing it unfold here today?
Yeah, it's extremely rare, Brian. It's obviously so significant to the people of Uvalde who have been calling for accountability in the earliest days after the shooting. But in terms of a legal precedent, in terms of legal cases, it's also very unique because, as you mentioned, it is only the second time that law enforcement officers have faced criminal charges for what prosecutors and officials say were inaction. The last time was the Parkland police shooting that happened back in 2017. That former Broward County deputy faced trial last year in Florida and was acquitted on child neglect charges.
I remember that, covered that.
Tony, what happens next, and what are the possible punishments that could be faced by these 2 officers?
Well, this case will certainly begin moving through the courts in coming days and coming weeks. Brian, again, just in talking to legal experts, one thing that will almost certainly happen is that there will likely be a change of venue from here in Uvalde County. Questions about whether or not these two law enforcement officials and officers could get a fair trial here. But in addition to that, should they be convicted, they would face up to 2 years behind bars and up to a $10,000 fine on the state jail felony charges.
Senior reporter Tony Plahetsky, great reporting as always. Great to have you here with us.
You.
We're live in Uvalde. Of course, we'll be following this story throughout the evening tonight. Have more tonight for you on KVUE News at 10. For now, live in Uvalde, I'm Brian Mays, along with senior reporter Tony Plahetsky. Back to you.
And Brian, just a quick question for you. I know this news just came out about an hour ago or so. Many in the community are still hearing it themselves. Have you seen anything outside of the courthouse? Have people been coming by? Can you just kind of describe the scene out there for us?
I think people are just learning this, to be quite honest with you. This news we learned just over an hour ago. I don't know that many people have heard the news, to be quite honest with you. We're seeing more and more reporters here now, but before we started about 5 o'clock this afternoon, there wasn't much buzz. There wasn't much activity here, but I expect that to change over the next few days. Of course, as I mentioned, these families have been waiting more than 760 days for something to take place like this along these lines. I'm sure a lot of them would say this is just the beginning, this isn't near enough, but there is a step forward in there, at least their hope that somebody would be held accountable for what happened on that day 2 years ago here in Uvalde.
Brian, thank you so much. Tony, thank you to you as well. And speaking of the families, in just the last 30 minutes, we've actually heard from 2 Uvalde families about those indictments. Ana Rodriguez, mother of Maite Rodriguez, wrote, quote, "My heart breaks for Maite. My heart breaks for her siblings. The fact that these 2 people are being held accountable doesn't change anything for me. It doesn't bring her back."
I get that, but still, those cops should be held accountable.
Wrote, quote, "We feel there should be more facing
I agree with that.
charges."
Now, the Uvalde grand jury started meeting back in January. The proceedings are secret, but in February, KVUE News learned multiple officers who responded to Robb Elementary School on the day of the shooting were subpoenaed. By state law, we weren't allowed to know who they were or why they were called to testify. Later that month, though, Texas DPS Director Colonel Steve McCraw went before the grand jury. Back in 2022, about a month after the tragedy, he testified to state senators, saying the law enforcement response to the shooting was a, quote, abject failure.
Yeah, they stood around having a thumb so far up their keister, then they threatened to arrest the parents. I mean, come on, get out of here. I'm glad maybe it's too little too late. Yeah, it's not going to break about the children and the teachers, but hey, you know what? It's time for accountability. It's time for transparency.